All right, so in this video, I want to look at functionality called exploding in a Pandas data frame. And in this video, in contrast, most of the videos in this playlist, we've been using that store sales forecasting data. But in that first video in this playlist, we had also downloaded this Netflix titles.csv, which is in the same folder as this untitled notebook, which I'm going to be working with. So we're going to use this Netflix titles CSV file. So let's go ahead and load it in. So I'm going to import pandas as PD. All right, and I'm going to do a pd.read CSV, and it is Netflix titles.csv. This one's actually going to load in perfectly with no issues. And let's look at the first two rows. All right, so what this is just an ongoing list of various shows, movies that were on Netflix, and you've got information about like the ID, what's its type, is it a movie or a TV show, its title, director, the cast, and so forth. So let's assume that we wanted to do a real quick analysis and we wanted to figure out, well, who are members of the cast or are cast members that have been in maybe the most Netflix movies or TV shows. All right, so here's the challenge, right? So let me do a .loc and grab for index label 1. All right, so if you look, this cast is what we're interested in. And let me actually grab that value out. So I'm going to get the cast column. All right, so the way that they've represented the cast is, it's essentially, they've got all the cast members in a string format with commas separating their name. So we've just got one big string, and we got a bunch of cast members in here. But what we're interested in is for each of these individuals. So for, Gail Mabellane, how many unique shows has she been in, movies or TV shows. So what we need to be able to do is to take this string representation of the cast and essentially split it by those commas to get the individuals that were making up the cast, and then do some type of a grouping based off of that. All right, and this is where this whole notion of exploding a column comes in. It's very handy, and again, I find myself needing to do this more often than I think I would, just based on the data that I get. You can also see right here in this listed in category. Let's bring that in as well. That data is the same way, right? So this is apparently like a category, and this one is associated with 3. So if you were trying to do a similar analysis on category, you would need to do the same thing. All right, so again, this is something that I find myself doing very often. It's not a new functionality. It's been around for a couple of years, but when I first started working with Pandas, the functionality did not exist. So I had to kind of write these methods that were custom and doing looping. It was really slow. And I remember being so excited when they put this in, and it really can be extremely helpful. All right, so let's work with this. Let's see if we can do this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a selection of our columns. So I'm going to make an object called columns to keep. And that's just going to be, let's say that we only want to keep show ID. That'll give us a unique identifier for each show. And then maybe the cast. So let's just work with the data that we need. So those are my columns to keep. And then I'm going to do data. I could do a .loc, give me all the rows, and then just give me columns to keep. Right, that gives me back those 2 columns. Or I can just simply say, just give me columns to keep. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this is going to be my cast information. All right. And I like to be a little bit conservative and make sure that the object that I'm getting back is not just a view of the data frame. So to make sure that I'm not actually changing the underlying data frame. So I'm going to say, well, from data, get those columns to keep, and you can make a copy of it as such. So now I've got a copy of that data frame with just those 2 columns. All right, so what we want to do is take this column right here, essentially get it out to individual cast members, and then figure out the number of unique shows or show IDs for each one of those cast members. Now, of course, we're making an assumption here that somebody didn't go in and misspell somebody. So, if we're seeing, Tim Allen or Courtney Cox, in, any entry, we're talking about the same people. So we are making some assumptions here, but again, this will be perfectly fine to demonstrate this technique. All right, the first thing that we need to do is to get this cast column, and it's currently a string, so we need to use our string methods, and then we need to do a split. So I want to split on that comma. Now what this is doing is it's making each one of those into a list where the entries in that list are things that are split on that comma. So right now this returns a series, so I can grab this first entry here by doing a .loc 0, and let's just look at that. .loc 1, I'm sorry. All right, so we do in fact have a list of our people that made up that cast, but one thing you ought to notice is when it's split on that comma, we've got this leading space, right? Because if we think about this, I'm just going to comment the string split part out. If we're splitting on this comma here, right? Well, it's going to split in this, this first name and then the second name, but that second name's got that space in front of it, right? So we end up with something like this. So what we actually, will probably need to do is instead of splitting on that comma, I'm going to split on comma space, right? We could do it there, or we can actually, once we do the explosion, we could do a strip on this. So either way, let's actually do the strip. So I'm just going to say, go ahead and split on the commas, right? Right now we know that, these names right here, whatever second, third, fourth, they're going to have a space in front of them. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to overwrite the value in cast. Or I'm going to call this, let's just overwrite that value in cast. I'm going to put this all up in one cell here. All right, so now if I look at cast information, we've got these lists. Now what we want to do is we want to essentially break each one of these out into a separate row, each one of those cast members. And then if we've got 25 cast members for show ID S2, we might have 25 rows, one for each cast member. All right, and we can do that by using explode. All right, you provided a column name. Okay, so I'm going to say, well, the column that I want to explode on is cast. All right, so now we've got multiple occurrences for show 2. Right, one for each of those cast members. All right, so notice this. When I comment that out and run cast information, we've got 8,807 rows. When I do the explosion, we've got 64,951. So when we expand that cast out across all of those, different members, of course, it makes our data grow longer, right? So I'm going to say cast information equals this. Great. All right, so this is looking good. Now, remember, we're expecting for some of these to have spaces in them. And why is that important? Because, if it could be that we've got the same actor represented in different rows in this cast column, but if some of them have spaces and some of them don't, those strings are going to be different. So, for example, like in Python, the string hello is different from the string hello with a space at the front. Those are two different things. So if I run this, that's false. Those things are not equal. So we need to make sure that the things that we're comparing in these columns, if they have spaces, they should all have spaces, or all occurrences of particular value should. So to guarantee this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the string strip method to strip out any leading white space. So I'm going to say cast information now for that cast column is going to be whatever's in there. I'm going to use string and then strip. Perfect. Putting this all together. All right. And now if I were to grab, say, this value, which let's run this both ways. So let me comment out that last piece. And now I'm going to do cast information. I'm going to do actually an iloc. This is one of the cases I might use that because I've got multiple index values and I want to grab this name right here. So I'm going to say, give me the 0, 1, 2 index position on the axis 0 or the rows, and then give me 0, 1. All right, so notice that that individual has a space there, but when we run that strip, that space goes away. Awesome. All right, so now we've got our cast information here. All right, and now we want to figure out the number of unique show IDs by cast. So we could do a dot group by, and we'll go ahead and do this by cast member. I'll do a dot ag, and I'll say unique show IDs equals show ID dot in unique. All right, so now we've got different cast members by their unique show IDs. I'm going to overwrite cast information there. I'm just overwriting everything at this point. All right, so this is all just kind of one data processing pipeline. And let's say I want to get the top 5, right? Well, how could we do that? Well, one thing that you can do in a Pandas DataFrame is you can use a sort values. And I can say, well, I want to sort them by unique show IDs. And then do I want that to be ascending? An ascending, so from small to large. That's not true. I want that to be descending. So I'm going to set ascending equal false. All right, so these are going to be my top 5. All right. I'm just going to keep overriding that. Get that all pulled up. And now let's say we want to actually do the top 10. Well, how could I get the top 10? Well, I could just say, give me the first 10 rows. Right, and there you go. Right, so we've got those top 10. And if I wanted to plot, this is what's the type of this thing? Well, the type of this thing is a data frame that it's returning. So we saw in a previous video that data frames have a dot plot method. So I could say, well, dot plot, and then say kind is equal to a bar plot. I think it's just bar. And then we'll do an edge color equals K. And there we go. All right, so we got a simple plot. If we wanted to flip that, because maybe a plot with the bars going from bottom to top is not the best, we could do, I believe it's a bar H for a horizontal bar plot. And there we go. All right, so this was, just a quick example of, how we can use this explode. So we come from this column here where they put a bunch of data in this column or this comma separated string. We showed how we could use a string method like split to get that into a list. We can then explode. And then we did a little bit of cleaning up with strip. And ultimately it allows us to get insight on individuals within that column. All right, so that concludes this video.